Richard Bennett looked out the large window of his office. His office was at the top of the Galactic Transit Solutions building. From here, he could see Earth below and the stars beyond. Richard had worked hard to become the CEO of the biggest space travel company in the solar system, but today he was not happy. Richard tapped the screen on his desk. Numbers and charts appeared. The numbers were bad. Very bad. More and more people were complaining about the bus routes between Earth, the Moon, and Mars. Buses were always late. Customers were angry. Something was wrong. This makes no sense, Richard said to himself. He ran his hand through his gray hair. At 52, Richard had spent 30 years in the space travel business. He knew how things should work. The door to his office opened. Olivia Mendez walked in carrying a cup of coffee. Olivia had been Richard's assistant for 8 years. She knew when he needed coffee without him asking. "Your coffee, sir," Olivia said, placing the cup on his desk. "And the board members want to know if you'll join their meeting in 10 minutes. Richard took the coffee but kept looking at the numbers on his screen. These reports from the Moon base and Mars station show the same problem. Buses are running late. Route managers blame the drivers. Drivers say it's not their fault. Olivia glanced at the screen. The route managers send weekly reports saying the drivers are lazy. They say the drivers take too many breaks. Richard frowned. That doesn't sound right. Our drivers are good workers. They go through 3 years of training. Why would they suddenly become lazy? He stood up and walked to the window. The Earth looked peaceful from space, but Richard knew better. Running a company with 10,000 employees across 3 planets was never peaceful. "I need to see for myself," Richard said suddenly. He turned to face Olivia. "Cancel all my meetings for the next 2 weeks. Olivia's eyes widened. "All of them? Even the Saturn contract talks?" "All of them," Richard said firmly. "Tell everyone I'm on a special mission to the outer planets. Don't give details." "What are you planning?" Olivia asked. She had learned that when Richard got this look in his eyes, something big was about to happen. Richard smiled. "I'm going. Undercover. I need to see what's really happening on our bus routes. I want to know why our buses are always late and why our customers are unhappy." "Undercover? You mean like a secret boss?" Olivia asked. "Exactly. I'll be a new bus driver. I'll work the routes between the Moon and Mars. I'll see firsthand what's happening." Olivia looked worried. "Sir, you haven't driven a space bus in 20 years. "I still have my license," Richard said. "And I practice in the simulator every month. I can drive a bus." "The board won't like this," Olivia warned. Richard shrugged. "The board wants profits. Profits are down because customers are unhappy. I need to fix the problem to get profits back up. The board will understand that." Olivia nodded slowly. "What name will you use?" "Everyone knows what Richard Bennett looks like." Richard thought for a moment. "Rick Beckett, simple name, easy to remember. I'll need a new ID card, work papers, and a background story. Can you arrange that?" "Of course," Olivia said. She was already making notes on her tablet. "What about your appearance? Your face is on the company website and all the ads." Richard touched his well-trimmed beard. "I'll shave the beard, wear glasses, change my hair color a bit. Most workers have never seen me in person anyway." "Where will you start?" Olivia asked. "Luna Base 1, the main hub on the Moon," Richard replied. "That's where most complaints come from. I want basic worker housing, nothing special. I need to live like the drivers live." Olivia continued making notes. "Timeline?" "I leave tomorrow," Richard said. "The sooner I start, the sooner I can find answers." "That's very fast," Olivia said, looking surprised. "But I'll make it happen." "Thank you, Olivia," Richard said. "This stays between us, no one else can know." Olivia nodded. "I understand. I'll have everything ready by morning." After Olivia left, Richard turned back to the window. Something wasn't right with his company. The report said one thing, but his gut told him another. In 30 years of business, Richard had learned to trust his gut. The next morning, Richard looked at himself in the mirror. His beard was gone. His normally silver, Hair was now brown. The glasses he wore changed the shape of his face slightly. He looked different. Not completely different, but enough that people who only saw his picture occasionally wouldn't recognize him. Olivia handed him a small bag. Your new ID, work papers, and background information are in here. You're Rick Beckett, age 48, newly, transferred from Europa Station. You have 8 years of driving experience on the outer moon routes. Now you're assigned to the Luna-Mars route. Richard took the bag. How do I look? Do I look like a bus driver? Olivia smiled. You look like a tired worker who needs a paycheck. Perfect. Good, Richard said. What about communications? I might need to contact you. Use this, Olivia handed him a plain communicator. It looks standard, but it has a secure channel directly to my personal device. Call only in emergencies. Otherwise, send text messages during your rest breaks. I'll monitor them constantly. Richard put the communicator in his pocket. The shuttle to Luna Base leaves in 1 hour. I should go. Your return ticket is open-ended, Olivia said. Come back when you have answers. Richard picked up his small travel bag. He was suddenly nervous. It had been years since he had done actual work instead of sitting in meetings. But he was also excited. This felt right. Remember, you're Rick Beckett now, Olivia said. A normal driver trying to make a living, not the CEO of the biggest transit company in the solar system. Rick Beckett, Richard repeated. Just a regular guy who drives buses in space. He took one last look around his big office. Then he walked out, leaving behind the comfort and power he was used to. For the next 2 weeks, he would live the life of his employees. He would find the truth about why his buses were always late. As the elevator took him down from the executive floor to the ground level, Richard felt his mindset changing. He stood differently, less straight. He let his shoulders slump slightly. By the time the elevator reached the bottom, Richard Bennett was gone. In his place stood Rick Beckett, space bus driver, ready for his first day of work. The shuttle landed at Luna Base 1 with a gentle bump. Rick Beckett, who was really Richard Bennett in disguise, stepped off the shuttle with the other workers. He carried a small bag with his clothes and personal items. The moon base was busy and noisy. Workers rushed in all directions. Announcements echoed through the large arrival area. Rick looked at his work papers. He needed to report to Terminal 7 for his first assignment. He joined the crowd of people moving through the base. Everyone looked tired. Rick noticed that most workers barely spoke to each other. They just kept their heads down and walked quickly. The main corridor was long and gray. Signs pointed to different areas of the base. Rick followed the signs to the transit worker housing section. He needed to drop off his bag before reporting for work. The housing area was not what Rick expected. The hallways were narrow. The lights flickered. Some ceiling panels were missing. Water dripped in one corner. This was nothing like the clean, bright company that Rick saw in promotional videos. A bored-looking man sat at the housing desk. His name tag said, Paul Wright, housing manager. Rick handed over his papers. I'm Rick Beckett, new transfer from Europa. I need my room assignment. Paul barely looked at the papers. Block D, room 347, sharing with 2 others. Bathroom is down the hall. Meal tickets are issued weekly at this desk. Don't lose them. Rick took the key card Paul handed him. Thanks. Where's Block D? Paul pointed to the left. That way. Follow the blue line on the floor. Rick found Block D in room 347. The room was small with 3 beds. 2 were already claimed. Personal items showed that his roommates had been there a while. Rick put his bag on the empty bed. There was barely enough room to turn around. A small locker stood next to the bed. Rick locked his few belongings inside. After changing into his driver uniform, Rick headed to Terminal 7. He needed to report to his route manager. The terminal was on the other side of the base. Rick walked quickly, not wanting to be late on his first day. Terminal 7 was busy with activity. Space buses were being loaded with passengers and cargo. Maintenance workers checked engines. Security officers scanned IDs. Drivers hurried between buses, looking at schedules on their tablets. Rick checked the staff board. It showed that Alan Powell was the route manager for Terminal 7. His office was at the back of the terminal. Rick walked toward it, passing many tired-looking drivers on the way. Near the office, Rick saw a scene that made him stop. A short, thin man with a red face was shouting at a woman in a driver's uniform. The woman looked down at her feet while the man yelled, "Fourth time this month you've been late, Cruz. Do you think schedules are just suggestions? Do you enjoy making me look bad to the regional office?" the man shouted. "Sir, the solar storm warning forced us to take the longer route around." The woman tried to explain. "Excuses. The other drivers made it through just fine. One more late arrival and you're cleaning waste tanks on Pluto. Understood?" The woman nodded without speaking and walked away. Her face showed defeat and exhaustion. Rick watched as she walked past him. Her eyes were red, either from tiredness or tears. The shouting man turned and saw Rick standing there. "You lost?" he asked sharply. "Are you Alan Powell?" Rick asked. "I'm Rick Beckett, new transfer. I was told to report to you." Alan Powell looked Rick up and down. "Beckett, right. You're the new driver from Europa." He checked his tablet. "You're assigned to Sylvia Martinez today. She's running the Mars Express to Olympus Base." "Where can I find her?" Rick asked. Alan pointed to a large space bus at the far end of the terminal. "Bay 12, and don't make her late. Martinez is one of the few drivers who actually cares about staying on schedule." "Thank you, sir," Rick said. He started to walk away. "Beckett," Alan called after him. Rick turned back. "I run a tight ship here, no excuses. You make your times or you find another job. Clear?" "Very clear," Rick said. He walked away, thinking about what he had just seen. This was not how Galactic Transit Solutions was supposed to treat its workers, not the company he had built. Rick found Bay 12 where a woman in her late 40s was checking the outside of a large blue and white space bus. The side of the bus said, "Mars Express, Luna to Olympus Base." "Sylvia Martinez?" Rick asked. The woman turned around. She had dark hair with some gray streaks. Her face showed years of experience. Her eyes were tired but alert. "That's me," she said. "You must be Beckett, the new transfer." "Yes, Rick Beckett," he said. "I was told to report to you for today's run." Sylvia looked at her watch. "You're right on time. That's good. Powell hates delays more than anything. Grab a checklist from the cabin and start on the right side thrusters. We need to leave in 25 minutes exactly." Rick entered the bus and found the maintenance checklist. He knew how to check a bus even though it had been many years since he had done it himself. He worked quickly, checking each thruster and marking the list. The inside of the bus was clean but worn. The seats were old. Some showed patches and repairs. The control panel had been updated but not recently. Rick noticed that some of the systems were at least 5 years old. At company headquarters, they always talked about having the newest equipment. But this bus was definitely not new. Sylvia came inside after finishing her checks. "Right side thrusters all good?" she asked. "All green," Rick confirmed. "Left side too. I checked them after I finished the right." Sylvia raised an eyebrow, looking slightly impressed. "Efficient, I like that. Take the co-pilot seat. We launch in 10 minutes. This is a 20-hour journey to Mars, so get comfortable." Rick sat in the co-pilot seat as Sylvia began the startup sequence. She worked quickly and confidently. Her hands moved over the controls with the ease of someone who had done this thousands of times. Passengers began boarding the bus. They found their seats and stored their bags. A young flight attendant named Greg helped them get settled. The bus would carry 48 passengers to Mars today. All passengers accounted for, Greg reported to Sylvia. "We're ready when you are." Sylvia nodded. "Prepare for departure." As the bus engines fired up, Rick felt excitement and nerves. He was about to see firsthand what was happening on these routes. He would find out why the buses were always late. And he would learn why Alan Powell was so angry at his drivers. The bus lifted off smoothly. Sylvia guided it out of the terminal and into the darkness of space. The Earth and Moon grew smaller behind them. Mars was a tiny red dot ahead. Their journey had begun. 6 hours had passed since the space bus left Luna Base. Rick sat in the co-pilot seat next to Sylvia. He watched how she handled the controls with skill and ease. The passengers in the back were mostly quiet. Some slept. Others watched movies on their screens. A few worked on tablets. "We're coming up on the asteroid belt crossing," Sylvia said. She pointed to a map on the control panel. "This is where things get tricky." Rick looked at the map. A red zone showed where they needed to go. "That looks dangerous," he said. Sylvia nodded. "It is. This area has gotten worse in the last year." "Small rocks and space junk have been moving into this section of the route. Why not go around it?" Rick asked. "Company policy," Sylvia said with a frown. "Going around takes more fuel and time. Powell says we must follow the approved route unless there's an emergency." Rick watched as Sylvia slowed the bus and turned. On the front shield. The shield was designed to push away small rocks, but it used a lot of power. Sylvia's eyes stayed fixed on the path ahead. Her hands gripped the controls tightly. "Look there," she said, pointing to the right side of the window. "See that damage to the route marker?" Rick saw a floating metal sign that marked the official route. Part of it was bent and broken. "That happened last week," Sylvia continued. "Joe Franklin hit a rock the size of a baseball. It damaged his right engine. He had to limp back to Luna Base at half speed." "Was anyone hurt?" Rick asked. "No, but Joe got written up for being 6 hours late." Powell didn't care about the reason. As they moved deeper into the belt, Rick could see more and more rocks floating in space. Some were tiny, like grains of sand. Others were as big as cars. Sylvia carefully guided the bus between them, sometimes having to stop completely to let a large rock pass by. "We've sent 17 reports about this section," Sylvia said. "We've asked for the route to be changed or for cleaning ships to come clear it. Nothing happens." Rick knew about cleaning ships. They were special vessels that used magnets and nets to catch space junk and move rocks away from travel routes. His company owned 20 of them. He wondered why none were working here. Suddenly, alarms started to sound. Red lights flashed on the control panel. "Micrometeor shower," Sylvia said calmly, but her face looked worried. "Hang on." She pressed a button on the ceiling. Her voice came through the speakers in the passenger area. "Attention all passengers. We're experiencing a micrometeor shower. Please fasten your seatbelts and remain calm. This is a standard procedure." Rick could hear the small rocks hitting the outside of the bus. They made pinging sounds like rain on a metal roof. Some passengers looked scared. The flight attendant, Greg, moved through the cabin, checking that everyone was secure. Sylvia worked the controls with expert hands. She turned the bus sideways to present the smallest target to the shower of tiny rocks. She adjusted the shield, power to maximum. Her movements were quick but not panicked. "This is why we're always running late," she said as she worked. "The route plan says we should cross this section in 45 minutes, but it really takes 2 hours to do it safely." The shower lasted for 20 minutes. When it ended, Sylvia checked all systems before continuing forward. "No damage," she reported. "We got lucky this time." She made a note in the ship's log about the incident. Rick noticed that she wrote down the exact time and location. "I document everything," she explained. "Not that it matters. Powell says we exaggerate the dangers to excuse our late arrivals." After they cleared the dangerous area, Sylvia set the bus on autopilot. She stretched her arms and yawned. "Break time," she said. "You can handle things for a while?" The autopilot does most of the work, but someone needs to watch for warnings. "I can handle it," Rick assured her. Sylvia got up from her seat. "I'm going to check on the passengers and get some coffee. Want some?" "Yes, thanks," Rick said. While Sylvia was gone, Rick looked more closely at the control panel and the route. According to the official schedule, they were now 53 minutes behind. But based on what he had seen, there was no safe way to cross the asteroid belt any faster than Sylvia had done. Sylvia returned with 2 cups of coffee. "Greg says the passengers are fine. A few complained about the rough section, but most understand it's just part of space travel." Rick took the coffee. "How long have you been driving this route?" 8 years, Sylvia said. 4 years before that on the Earth-Luna route, and 2 years on cargo runs to the outer planets before that." "That's a lot of experience," Rick said. Do you like the job? Sylvia took a sip of coffee before answering. I used to love it. Space is beautiful. The planets are amazing. Helping people travel between worlds felt important. She paused. But lately it's gotten harder. More pressure. Less support. Always being told we're not good enough, not fast enough. Powell seems tough, Rick said carefully. Powell is scared, Sylvia replied. Regional managers pressure him about times and schedules. He pressures us. Everyone's afraid of looking bad to the people above them. What about the CEO? Rick asked, trying not to sound too interested. Does he know what's happening out here? Sylvia laughed without humor. Richard Bennett? He lives in a fancy office in orbit around Earth. He probably hasn't been on a regular bus route in 20 years. People like him don't know what it's really like out here. Rick felt uncomfortable. Was that how his employees saw him? As someone who didn't understand their daily challenges? Maybe he would care if he knew, Rick suggested. Maybe, Sylvia said, not sounding convinced. But how would he know? All he sees are reports. And the reports lie. They sat quietly for a while watching the stars. Mars was growing larger in the front window, still many hours away, but visibly bigger than before. Sylvia broke the silence. It's not just the dangerous routes and the pressure about times. It's the little things too. Like what? Rick asked. The buses need better maintenance. Some are really old. The crew quarters at the bases are falling apart. Rest breaks keep getting shorter. Medical care for space radiation exposure is hard to get. She shook her head. It all adds up. Rick thought about what he was hearing. None of this matched the reports he received at headquarters. The reports showed money being spent on maintenance, safety, and worker facilities. Where was that money really going? The rest of the journey continued smoothly. When it was time for sleep shifts, Sylvia showed Rick to the small crew rest area at the back of the cockpit. It had 2 narrow bunks. You sleep first, she said. I'll wake you in 4 hours for your shift. Rick lay on the hard bunk. It was not comfortable. He thought about Sylvia's words as he tried to fall asleep. His company had serious problems that he hadn't known about. People were struggling. Safety was being ignored. And somewhere, money was being wasted or stolen. He had much more to learn, but one thing was already clear. Things needed to change, and as CEO, it was his job to make those changes happen. The space bus approached Mars after the long journey from the moon. The red planet grew larger in the front window. Rick could see the dome of Olympus Base gleaming on the surface. After 20 hours of travel, they were finally arriving at their destination. Beginning landing sequence, Sylvia announced to the passengers over the speaker system. Please return to your seats and secure all loose items. We will be docking at Olympus Base in approximately 15 minutes. Rick watched as Sylvia expertly guided the bus toward Mars. Her hands moved smoothly over the controls. She had done this hundreds of times before. We're 57 minutes behind schedule, Sylvia said quietly to Rick. Powell is going to be angry. Rick checked the flight log. But we had to slow down for the asteroid field and the micrometeor shower. That wasn't your fault. Sylvia gave a small, sad smile. Powell doesn't care about reasons. He only cares about the schedule. The space bus entered the Mars atmosphere. There was some turbulence as they descended. Sylvia kept the bus steady, making small adjustments to their course. The landing thrusters fired, slowing their descent. Finally, with a gentle bump, they touched down on the landing pad at Olympus Base. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mars, Sylvia announced. Local time is 14:30. Temperature outside the base is minus 60 degrees Celsius. Please remain seated until the bus has fully docked with the airlock. She guided the bus into position next to the base airlock. With a hiss of air, the connection was made. Green lights showed on the control panel. Docking complete, Sylvia said. Pressure equalized. Passengers may now disembark. Thank you for traveling with Galactic Transit Solutions. The passengers gathered their belongings and began filing off the bus. Greg, the flight attendant, stood by the door, thanking each person as they left. Most passengers looked tired but relieved to have arrived. As the last passenger left, the communication screen on the control panel lit up. Alan Powell's angry face appeared. "Martinez. Beckett. Explain this delay immediately," he demanded, not even saying hello. Sylvia stood straight and faced the screen. "Sir, we encountered a level 3 debris field in section 12 of the route. We also experienced a micrometeor shower that required evasive maneuvers. All events were logged in the flight record." Powell's face turned red. "Excuses. The Arcturus transport made it through on schedule yesterday. You're just not pushing hard enough. This reflects poorly on my management record, and I won't have it." Rick spoke up. "Mr. Powell, the Arcturus is a cargo transport. It has stronger shields and no passengers. It can take risks we can't take with a passenger bus." Powell glared at Rick. "Who asked you, new guy? You've been here one day. Know your place if you want to keep this job." Something snapped inside Rick. He had seen enough. He had heard enough. This was not how his company should be run. This was not how his employees should be treated. "Actually," Rick said, reaching into his pocket, "my place is as CEO of Galactic Transit Solutions." He pulled out his real ID card and held it up to the screen. The card showed his picture and his title, Richard Bennett, Chief Executive Officer. Powell's face went pale. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You... What?" he stammered. "I've been traveling undercover on these routes for the past week," Rick said. His voice was calm but firm. "I've seen firsthand the dangerous conditions our drivers navigate daily, conditions that my reports somehow never mention." Sylvia stared at Rick in shock. "You're Richard Bennett? The CEO?" Rick nodded. "I am. And I owe you and every driver an apology. I had no idea how bad things had gotten. I thought our company was taking care of its workers and its equipment. I was wrong." Powell tried to recover. "Sir, I can explain. The schedules are set by regional. I'm just trying to meet the targets they give me. If the drivers would just work harder..." "Must stop." Rick cut him off. "I've heard enough about lazy drivers. I've traveled with Sylvia. I've seen how hard she works. I've seen the risks she takes to keep passengers safe while still trying to stay on schedule. The problem isn't the drivers, Mr. Powell." Powell swallowed hard. "Sir, please let me... I want to see you and all regional managers in my office tomorrow," Rick interrupted. 80800 down. Hours. "We'll discuss why you've been falsifying safety reports and pressuring drivers to risk their lives and our passengers. We'll also discuss why the maintenance funds aren't being used properly, and why worker facilities are in such poor condition." "Tomorrow? But Mars to Earth takes..." "Use the executive shuttle," Rick said coldly. "I'm sure you can find room in the budget for that, since you seem to find money for everything except worker safety." With that, Rick ended the call. The screen went black. The cockpit was silent for a long moment. Sylvia looked at Rick with wide eyes. "You're really Richard Bennett? The Richard Bennett?" Rick nodded. "I am. I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed to see what was really happening. The reports I get at headquarters all say everything is fine. Now I understand why. People like Powell are hiding the truth." "What happens now?" Sylvia asked. "Now," Rick said, "we fix this. Starting with the route schedules. They need to account for the real conditions, not some ideal scenario that doesn't exist. And we need to get cleaning ships out here to clear the debris fields, and proper maintenance for the buses and better facilities for the crews." Sylvia still looked stunned. "Why did you do this? Why go undercover?" Rick sat down in the co-pilot's chair. "Because numbers on a screen can lie. Reports can be falsified. But seeing things with my own eyes, that's real. I needed to know the truth." News of Rick's real identity spread quickly through Olympus base. Drivers and other workers gathered near the bus, whispering and pointing. Some looked hopeful. Others looked suspicious, as if this might be some kind of trick. A group of drivers approached Rick as he and Sylvia exited the bus. One of them, an older man with gray hair, stepped forward. "Is it true you're really the CEO?" he asked. "I am," Rick confirmed. The man looked him straight in the eye. "Are you really going to fix things, or is this just for show?" Rick met his gaze. "I'm going to fix things, starting tomorrow. What's your name?" Frank Wilson, 23 years. As a driver, and I've seen promises come and go. This isn't a promise, Frank, Rick said. This is a fact. Things are going to change. I've seen what you all deal with every day. It's unacceptable, and it's going to stop. Frank studied Rick's face for a moment, then slowly nodded. We'll see. Yes, Rick agreed. You will. As the day ended, Rick found himself in the crew quarters at Olympus Base. Like the ones on Luna, these quarters were run down and overcrowded. But tonight there was a feeling of hope in the air. Word had spread about what had happened. Drivers and staff talked excitedly about changes that might come. Rick sat with Sylvia and a group of drivers in the small break room. They told him their stories. They showed him broken equipment that hadn't been fixed for months. They shared their logs of dangerous situations that had been ignored by management. Tomorrow, Rick told them, is the beginning of a new era for galactic transit solutions, an era where safety comes first, where drivers are respected, where the truth matters more than making schedules look good on paper. Some believed him, some didn't, but all of them were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. 3 months had passed since Richard Bennett's undercover journey. He stood in the newly renovated command center at Luna Base 1. The walls were clean and freshly painted. New screens showed the positions of all buses in the system. Workers moved with purpose, no longer looking tired and defeated. The new debris-clearing ships are already making a difference, Olivia said as she handed Richard the latest reports. Route 12 through the asteroid belt is now rated safe for regular travel. Richard nodded as he looked at the numbers. Passenger complaints are down by 72%. Driver retention is up by 43%. These are good results, Olivia. And what about our former management team? Richard asked. Alan Powell and 3 other regional managers have been reassigned, Olivia reported. They now work on the debris-clearing ships, learning firsthand about field conditions. Richard smiled slightly. He didn't fire Powell and the others. He wanted them to understand the real challenges of space travel. Working on the cleaning ships was hard, physical work. It gave them a new perspective. How are the board members taking all these changes? Olivia asked. The new spending must be affecting short-term profits. They were skeptical at first, Richard admitted, but the improved safety record and reduced accident costs have won them over. And happier customers mean more business in the long run. Even the financial team can see that now. The door opened, and Sylvia Martinez entered. She wore a new uniform with the title Driver Advocacy Director on the badge. This was a new position that Richard had created. Sylvia now spoke for all drivers in management meetings. She made sure their concerns were heard. The Driver Council has approved the new scheduling system, Sylvia reported. For the first time in years, we're setting realistic times for our routes. Drivers can follow the schedule without taking dangerous shortcuts. And the passengers? Richard asked. Are they complaining about the longer travel times? Actually, no, Sylvia said. They prefer knowing the real arrival time. Before we told them a trip would take 15 hours, but it really took 20. Now we tell them 18 hours from the start, and we usually arrive a little early. They're happier with that. Richard walked to the large window overlooking the landing area. From here, he could see several buses being loaded with passengers and cargo. Maintenance crews worked on others doing proper checks and repairs. The whole operation looked smoother and more efficient. The new maintenance schedule is working well, Sylvia continued. Buses are getting fixed before things break. We've had 0 emergency repairs this month. And the crew facilities? Richard asked. Much better, Sylvia said with a smile. The new housing areas on Luna and Mars are clean and comfortable. The food is better. The rest areas on the buses are improved. Drivers can actually sleep during their break times now. Richard nodded, pleased with the progress. It wasn't perfect yet, but things were moving in the right direction. What about the route manager system? Is the new structure working? This had been one of the biggest changes. Instead of having route managers who never left their offices, Richard created a new system. Now managers had to drive a route themselves at least once per month. They couldn't set policies without experiencing the real conditions. It's working very well, Sylvia said. When managers actually drive the routes, they understand the challenges better. They make more reasonable demands, and they're more willing to listen to driver concerns. Richard noticed a driver walking past the command center window. The man looked up, saw Richard, and gave a small wave and a nod. Richard recognized him as Frank Wilson, the skeptical driver he'd met on Mars. Frank had been right to doubt. Talk was cheap. Actions were what mattered. "We've still got work to do," Richard said. "Some of the older buses need replacing. The medical program for radiation exposure needs more funding. And we need better emergency response systems for the outer planet routes." "One step at a time," Olivia reminded him. "We've done more in 3 months than the company did in the previous 3 years." "That's true," Richard agreed, "but we lost our way for too long. We forgot what matters most." "Which is?" Sylvia asked. "People," Richard said simply. "The people who work for us and the people we serve. Not schedules, not reports, not numbers on a screen. People." They watched as a bus lifted off from the landing pad. It rose smoothly, its engines glowing blue in the darkness of space. The bus turned and headed toward Mars, carrying people safely to their destination. Later that day, Richard walked through the driver rest area. This space had been completely changed. The old, cramped room with broken furniture was gone. Now, there were comfortable chairs, clean sleeping areas, and a proper dining section. Drivers could truly rest here between long journeys. Several drivers were eating lunch at the tables. They looked up when Richard entered. There was no fear in their eyes now, no resentment. They nodded to him with respect, and he nodded back. Richard got a cup of coffee and sat at a table with 2 drivers he didn't know. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Not at all, sir," one of them said. "I'm Joe, and this is Lena. We're on the Jupiter run." "The longest route," Richard said. "How are the new rest stations working out there?" "Much better," Lena said. "Having proper facilities at Ganymede makes a huge difference. We can actually recover between shifts now." They talked for 20 minutes about the Jupiter route. The drivers told Richard about some new challenges they were facing. Richard listened carefully and took notes. This was how things should work. Open communication, real listening, actual understanding. When Richard left the rest area, he felt good about the changes they had made. But he also knew there was more to do. Space was vast. Travel was complicated. New problems would always arise. The key was building a system that could address issues quickly, not hide them. Back in his office, Richard looked at old photos on the wall, pictures of the company in its early days. His father had started with just 2 small ships running between Earth and the Moon. Now they had hundreds of buses going to all the planets. They had grown so big that they had lost touch with their own people. Never again, Richard said to himself. He would visit different bases regularly now. He would talk to drivers and mechanics and ground staff. He would see things with his own eyes, not just read reports. As night fell on Luna Base, Richard watched the stars through his window. Somewhere out there, people were traveling on his buses. Drivers were guiding them safely through the dangers of space. It was an important job, a noble job, and now it was being done right. The next morning, Richard met with his executive team. They discussed the changes of the past 3 months and the plans for the future. Everyone agreed that the company was stronger now, safer, better. "We're back on the right track," Richard told them. "We remembered what this company is really about." "And what is that?" one of the executives asked. Richard smiled. "Connecting worlds safely, taking care of the people who make that possible, and never forgetting that behind every schedule, every route, every bus, are real people with real lives. That's what matters most." As he ended the meeting, Richard knew that his journey as Rick Beckett had changed everything. Sometimes, to lead properly, you had to walk in someone else's shoes. You had to see the truth for yourself. It was a lesson he would never forget.